So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Sharif Mansour. Sharif has been with Atlassian for a number of years. He's worked on Confluence, and he's really driven a lot of change in Confluence over the past couple of years. What Sharif's been working on more recently, though, you saw in the announcement yesterday morning, it involved the task management, Confluence Mobile, the to-do lists, and all that sort of stuff. And Sharif's going to share with us how he actually incorporated customer feedback in that development process. So let's welcome Sharif.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. Doing well? Enjoying it? Still awake? All right. A couple people asleep. You wake up. As Nick said, I'm Sharif Mansour, product manager at Atlassian, and this is a picture of me with a funny hat. Apparently, it's a traditional Egyptian hat. I didn't know that. But yeah, been a product manager for Confluence for a couple of years, and through that, I also founded Team Calendars at Atlassian, so I'm the product manager for that as well. And most recently, as Nick said, I've been working on the Confluence notifications and tasks features that you guys probably saw yesterday in the keynote and maybe the State of the Union as well. And throughout each of these experiences, I feel like I've learned a lot, some the hard way and some the easy way, about feedback and feedback cycles, and I thought I'd share that with you guys. For example, with Confluence 4.0, you can probably blame me for getting rid of wiki markup. Introducing the new editor to Confluence. And so I learned a lot about feedback during that process. Team Calendars was a brand new commercial add-on we launched at Atlassian. And so we had to do a lot in terms of feedback and validation and understand from our customers what they wanted from a calendaring solution. And Confluence notifications and tasks. We had this big blurry vision of where we wanted to head, and we're getting all this feedback about people wanting to collaborate faster, but we weren't sure exactly who we were building this for. We wanted to get a deeper understanding of how we can solve some specific problems. So we had to do a lot of feedback and validation for that as well. So from me, over the next few minutes, you'll be hearing about Eric Rice's build, measure, learn feedback loop. And I think that's really important in building software, and I think it sets some context for some different feedback techniques that you should consider incorporating. And I'll take you through just 3 of the feedback techniques that I've learned. I initially did this presentation and I had 10 techniques, and I realized that's probably an hour talk. And then I'll spend a tiny bit of time talking about how to pass on that feedback to your team and make sure your development team knows exactly what's going on. But before I begin, anyone who's read this book, Eric Rice? No, not a lot of people. Oh, cool. He's coming to speak this afternoon, so I encourage you to attend that talk. And it's a great book about building software and learning and validating. But I'll give you the quick summary, but you should still get the book. He kind of talks about this lean startup methodology. It was really simple. You've got an idea of something you want to build, and you've got a whole bunch of engineers, and you go ahead and build it. The next thing you need to do is measure it. And we typically do this a lot these days through analytics. And then following after that, you do some learning, and you go, oh, this is how this feature we used, oh, this is the feedback we received. And then you then go and iterate on that, and you go around this cycle over and over again. And typically in the measurement side, as I said, we mostly use analytics these days and numbers and number crunching and stuff. But I really think a large part of learning and measuring from customers is about unsolicited feedback. And that's really what I'm going to dive into for this presentation. So 3 quick tips for getting feedback or building effective feedback loops from your customers. First one is all about reducing friction. Friction, friction, friction. Get rid of it. You need to be obsessed about reducing friction as much as possible. And let me give you one quick example about what I'm talking about. Confluence 4.0, we redid the whole editor. We changed the way people create content in Confluence. And we wanted to make sure that we could grab as much feedback as possible. And we had to make sure people were in context with what they were doing. The more barriers they had to jump to give us feedback, the less important and the less natural the feedback would have been, and the less specifics we would have got, and the less motivated they would have been to give us feedback. So we introduced this feedback button. We shoved it at the top of the product, right in the screen where we knew we would get most of the feedback, so in the editor screen. So as they were creating content, if they had any feedback, they would just hit the button, and they would get a dialogue like this. And we spent a lot of time thinking about what fields do we want to capture, and had this long discussion. And we decided one required field, just one field. And if they want to add some more information, they can go ahead and add that. The results, we had over 900 feedback submissions, both internal and external, nearly 1,000. And actually, it was checking up with other product managers. It's probably the release Atlassian's had with the most amount of feedback we have ever received. So it was extremely successful. And I want to give you 3 principles you can have for reducing friction. First one is all about reducing your barrier to entry. Try and avoid having logins and context switching as much as possible. Second one, reduce the amount of fields you have available to you. Question every single field. Does it need to be there? Does it need to be required? Can we automate that field? Can we automatically capture the user's browser through some JavaScript without having them to enter in their browser details? And my third tip, and I've seen quite a few teams do this around Atlassian, is make it really easy for the user to express themselves. So you might want some feedback like, is this feature good? Are you happy with it? And so I've seen some teams put smiley face and an unhappy face, yes or no. So various tools to help you capture this feedback. There's quite a few. Oh, geez. Oh, spill the beans, Sharif, on number 2. Various tools to help you capture some feedback. There's quite a few out there. The one I think most of you will probably, I'm all over the place. All right, here we are, the tools. There's lots of free stuff. All the stuff on the screen's free. Come check me out afterwards for some details. The one most of you are interested in is the Jira Issue Collector. It's free as well if you're a Jira customer, so check it out. My second tip is all about making it fun, making the feedback experience more engaging. And in Australia, we have this terrible habit of copying all the TV shows that you guys have in the States. And so I got home from work one day, and we were getting some feedback internally, and I wanted to make the feedback experience more engaging and reward people for getting feedback. And I was watching The Biggest Loser, and I said, hey, what if we made it a competition? People would be more motivated to give us feedback. So we introduced The Biggest Whinger. It was a Confluence 4.0 edition, and a whinger is someone who complains a lot. I'm not sure if that's Australian slang or not. Is it? Yeah, it is. Okay. And so we blogged about it, and we asked people to give us feedback, and we'll give a prize to the biggest whinger. And because this was all going into Jira, we were able to easily capture all the feedback and report on it using a Jira gadget, run in the dashboard, and we could see who the top feedback people were, and we gave them a prize. Some other techniques you might want to do. For team calendars, we launched a beta, and we said, hey, any customer that gives us the best feedback or the most helpful feedback, we'll give you a free license. And we saw feedback skyrocket that way as well. Or something that I like to do a lot recently is if you're using Confluence for release notes, when you write up your release notes, mention the user that gave you that specific feedback. It's amazing what happens when they get an email notification and they can see that you have directly responded to what they asked you to fix or to implement. And it encourages a lot more feedback. So some 3 things to recap here. Think about ways you can incentivize your users to give feedback. Be courteous, say thank you, give them prizes, and recognize their time that they've spent giving you feedback. And think about various ways you can introduce game mechanics, whether it be a game or a competition, to get that feedback as well. My last tip is all about getting personal. And I'm not talking about finding your hottest customer and asking them out on a date, although you may want to do that sometimes. I'm more talking about understanding your customer in a lot more detail. And so this Confluence notifications and tasks feature I mentioned to you earlier, we had this big vision in mind, and we talked to a few people about it, but we didn't really understand who we're building this for and why they would use it in a deeper understanding. So one of our engineers, Shihab, came up with this brilliant idea. He got all our analytics and pulled in everyone's avatars and profile pictures. And we created a giant wallboard in front of the whole team that had everyone's face that used that feature yesterday and some key statistics for that user. For example, I know this is John Cordomore, and he used the feature yesterday. And we had some key feature stats at the bottom there. For example, those numbers aren't his hot or not rating. Those numbers there are actually, John received 2 notifications yesterday, and he checked them, and he created 4 tasks. Oh, okay, well, John created 4 tasks. That's quite a bit. Let's reach out to John and understand what he created those tasks for. Was it helpful for him? Can we make the experience any better? So, some tips in getting personal. Put a face to the statistic as much as you can. I know we get churned up in analytics and Hive data stores and data churning, but really try and get personal as much as possible and make that customer connection. And you'll be amazed what that does to help engage engineers. And it ends up coming up in everyday conversation. Oh, John wanted that feature, or John had that problem too. And they start bringing this up in front of you as well. The end result, you really get to know the customer and use that data to drive interviews. So we would reach out to the people that we saw used it a lot, or a little, or used one feature more than another feature. We'd try and understand why as well. All right, you're getting lots of feedback, and it's a lot for one person to manage. And how do you facilitate that, or what do you do with all that feedback? Typically, it kind of looks something like this. You've got your customers on one side, the product business guy in the middle, and engineers on the other side. And that kind of works well sometimes, but there is lots of communication barriers, and you lose that intimacy between your engineers and your customers. And you kind of want to head towards something like this a bit more. And so your engineers can help iterate faster and build stuff directly for the people that they're building it for. So you want to make that connection much tighter. And this is great for scaling all that feedback that you're receiving. So some techniques that we've done to do that is finding champions for specific problems. So I know Nabila is really interested in this kind of problem, so I'm going to let her champion that and talk to those customers specifically about that. And what this helps do is increase visibility between communication between the developers and the actual users. And we bring this up in our planning meetings. We go through our feedback page and say, hey, let's go through the feedback we received this week. Do you want to follow that up? Eric or Matt, do you want to look at that for more detail? And the end result, you're increasing communication, which is really important to make sure you're building the right thing and you're not off hiding behind a wall there. So to quickly recap, in case you forgot, build, measure, learn. Really think about this cycle and think about how you can improve the way you measure and get feedback. The 3 tips I gave you. First one, reduce friction. Reduce as much friction as possible. Try and make the experience fun and enjoyable and engaging through various game mechanics and all that. And get personal. Try and really understand the customer you're building this for. And hopefully you'll see engineers turning from code cutters to people who really who champion customer problems and really power on for the customer. Thanks, guys.